Good evening. Tonight I have a very special and very difficult personal announcement to make. But being Webster, I'm not going to start with that. I'm going to make you wait for it. I'm going to hark back to one of the major news stories which I have brought to you in recent years. In fact, it was a major news story which I started. And there are reverberations of it today at the Aboriginal Constitutional Conferences in Ottawa. In fact, it was Jack Monroe who came to me and he brought a petition from 100 loggers and workers in the camp on Lyle Island in the Queen Charlotte Islands. And these men were endangered, in fact, had lost their jobs because although everything was tickety-boo, the social credit government of the day was refusing to issue the cutting permits. And to me, it seemed abominable that with the logging plans already made, with the men working there, with the community of Sandspit and the other logging communities depending on this work, so I went up there. And I want you to see what I said as I stood on the top of a stump of an ancient cut-down spruce tree on Lyle Island. When you cut down a forest, it doesn't instantly look like Stanley Park. The best you can hope for is quick reforestation, such as being done on Lyle Island. And I'm standing on top of a tree, which is nearly 12 feet across, stood 200 feet, and if it hadn't been brought down sometime, it would have fallen down. It was an old spruce. But don't kid yourself that when you cut down 100 acres, 100 hectares you see behind me, that you can make it, as I said, like Stanley Park. Little did I know that in the eyes of the environmentalists, far less the Haida Indians, how much they opposed and objected to my practical application of what I regard as common sense. British Columbia lives by logging. The Indian land claims didn't come into my mind at all. After that, of course, there were a number of arrests. The Haida moved into action. And David Suzuki has been the principal campaigner against logging in Lyle Island. Yesterday, I talked to David Suzuki. In September 1985, I had the gall to stand on the top of an ancient spruce tree which had been cut down and advocate that the social credit government get off its duff and reissue logging permits for the men whose jobs were threatened at that time by their indecision. Little did I know what I was getting into. You know what happened after that with the Haidas, etc. Today, I am honored, and I mean honored, by the presence here of the man whom I've been hating at long distance for some time, the David Suzuki. David, surely to God there's room for both logging and the irreplaceable environment on parts of South Moresby, this jewel in our crown on the Pacific coast.
No, we're talking now about British Columbia as a whole. Within British Columbia, there is no question logging is and will always remain an important part of our economy. However much we go for high technology and all that stuff, natural resources will always be an important part of our economy. The question is, are there any pristine areas that might be left aside intact as a hedge against our ignorance? Do you think we know everything? Do you think we know enough to be able to manage our resources and replace the likes of what we're cutting down? Do you really think that?
I think we have known enough to realize, said he, putting on his redneck hat, that the prosperity of British Columbia, and we'll all blame the companies for how they did it, where they did it, and when they did it, has depended almost entirely on the logging and lumber industry.
This is 1987, Jack.
And that without it, even those parts that people want to take away from Lyle Island, we're going to be in an even lower, more miserable winter of our discontent.
Oh, come on. The amount of logging that this represents is a minuscule part of the total loggable area of British Columbia. We're talking, you're acting as if this little area, which represents what? 65 jobs? Is that what it represents?
That's all it represents at the moment on Lyle
How many
Island.
jobs are there in logging all across the province?
Across the province in logging and lumbering, there's about 25,000 jobs.
All right, well, what is this is a minuscule number of jobs.
You can multiply it, if you take 350 for the various activities in the Charlottes, multiply it by 5, you've got 1,500 jobs. and you've got the lifeblood of communities. But let's talk about what you want. First of all, we've had the federal government, which has announced a 6 weeks moratorium and says, although it won't come through with it, that they're going to have a plan for a national park at the end of that 6 weeks.
The federal government claims, at least according to what Macmillan has told me, that they've had an offer on the table for months. It's been the British Columbia government that's been incalcitrant and says no. They have been issuing the logging licenses. And the logging is still going on right now. It's not the federal government that has called a moratorium. It's a provincial affair in terms of the licenses. The provincial government has said we will not issue any more cutting block licenses. But meanwhile, they're cutting right now on Lyle.
For 6 weeks while they're waiting for Macmillan.
This is a normal end of the season. This is a normal end of the season. This has happened before. They claim a moratorium. I'll believe that when I see the logging stopped as a sign of good faith.
Do you want all of the South Moresbys permanently preserved?
You bet I do. You bet I do.
The whole thing.
That's 15% of the Charlottes.
Of the Charlottes. Now, you're well aware, of course, that logging has taken place on Lyle Island for differing estimates between 70 and 40 years, correct? Mm-hmm. And that logging, most of it has, all of it, the areas have been replanted, correct?
Well, the forestry industry would call it replanting.
Well, what's wrong with it?
Well, it has nothing to do with restoring what has been cut down. Look, trees are not corn plants or wheat plants. The notion that we are tree farming, that we are harvesting a renewable product, is simply not borne out by history. In this province, there are millions of acres that are simply devoid of any usable trees, because the whole notion of reforestation is a farce.
Do you mean that reforestation cannot be done even properly but with the best will in the world?
Reforestation can be done with a proper program. So it can be done in a way that will give you loggable trees within 50 to 100 years.
Right.
But will give you nothing like what you're cutting down on Lyle Island and South Moresby.
Wow.
Those took thousands of years to evolve.
But now, in the Moresbys, you've got 540 square miles. Take my premise, and I'm accurate. I can give you the exact figures of what's been logged and what's not been logged on Lyle Island. What's wrong with continuing an industry for sandspit on the Lyle Island logging?
I'm saying that it represents a minuscule part of logging in British Columbia. Look, you don't continue things because 65 jobs out of how many 25,000 jobs are at risk here. And you're putting then to the saw something that when cut down will never ever be replaced. Future generations will not judge you well, Mr. Webster, for your stand on this if you don't have those kinds of trees for them to know that they exist.
I don't know the Moresbys as well as you do, but I've been over them in helicopters, and on the seaward side there must be 450 square miles of land which is available now for national parks, where there has been no logging, except maybe 100 years ago, or during the war when there was all kinds of fringe logging,
well, if that's
which is now hidden by natural regeneration.
If that's true, my reaction would be, let's save that too.
Well, no, that includes the South
Do you know at one time?
Do you
know at one time the federal government wanted to save all of the Queen Charlottes? All of the Queen Charlottes as a national park.
Well, they've been too late for that.
That's right. All we're left with now is 15% of the Queen Charlottes. And you want all of that, or most of that.
No, I'm saying that the only battle I'm fighting at the moment is that you cannot say that, with the exception of the Windy Bay Ecological Reserve, that Lyle Island is a jewel in our crown.
That Lyle Island, Windy Bay is a part of that?
That's right. Windy Bay is saved.
Right.
Lyle Island has been logged for 40 to 70 years.
Right.
Much of it is natural regeneration.
A lot of it is gone, yes.
A lot of it is gone. Why the fuss about Lyle Island? Why not leave 15 years of logging for 100 men to keep sandspit healthy in Lyle Island?
I think the truth is that so long as we continue to talk as if it's jobs that are the bottom line and the economy, and you don't talk about something that is spiritual, the question is, how much do we not know? Are we not going to save anything for future generations? Yes, and you ought to circle that. Spiritual is what it's all about.
You have me there, but I'll be back to you, and I'm as spiritual as you are, hopefully, after the break. And to David Suzuki, let me say, I may well be in a minority, And I know I've been isolated on the West Coast here for 40 years. But the self-righteousness that comes through with your environmental friends, your ads in the Globe and Mail, your great supportive stories in the newspapers, seems to think that you regard us and our job worries as a mere bagatelle at the far end of the country. Don't you feel overly self-righteous about your position?
That's really amazing because of the difference in perspective. Do you know who the environmentalists are? It's a little ragtag group of people who have next to no money, who are doing it because they believe in this, they are fighting that fight, and government and the logging industry acts as if it's this enormous Goliath that's beating down on their head self-righteous.
It seems to me to be.
It's a tiny fraction of people. There may be 6, 7 people that are working
full-time.
You've got
enough money for $26,000 a page ads in the Globe and Mail.
Where was that?
Would we raise the pyramids?
Well, wonderful. I'm glad they're able to raise 26,000. Believe me, that is a major effort. And what these people see is their efforts going at the government, at the logging company year after year, and decisions are made that totally ignore them.
First of all,
you've got all the power.
You'll get no guilty pleas for me about the behavior of previous land operators in this country under tree farm license system.
All right, you agree with me, they're buccaneers, they were pirates.
They were buccaneers, they were pirates, but we're faced with the legacies of these pirates.
Right.
When these companies, you remember Rayonier, big company?
Yes.
They were bought out by local people. When these people they got these forest management licenses, they had to commit something like a couple of $100 million for the pulp mill at Port Alice. The purchase price was intense. Now, anybody who's going to compensate them must compensate them not for 32 or 25 miserable little $1 million, as we got after 17 years waiting for Pacific Rim, hundreds of millions of dollars. Who's going to pay for it?
That is something that I think is totally beside the point, Jack. Those are economic considerations someone has fouled up in the past. All I'm saying is, in the meantime, do you allow the logging to go on? Once those trees are down, there's no argument at all. And the cynical aspect right now of what's going on is that while all of these discussions are going on and you're making these claims, the loggers are in there cutting them down as fast as they can.
No,
and then the argument's over.
5 fellows were laid off yesterday. 2 road crews have been laid off.
This is the normal seasonal thing.
If the permits are not renewed, and it doesn't seem to me they will be.
We've heard that before in '85.
By June the 15th.
That's what we've heard before.
And then, but you will accept my premise that somebody, and I don't think the federal government is big enough or strong enough, is going to have to compensate in cash. All the massive losses.
I don't know about that, but someone may have to do that. I'm saying I am not interested in that. I am only interested in the fact that I think we have something that is an international heritage. It's a treasure. It is unique and special. And if we allow the logging to go on, you're going to lose a great part of it. And is nothing worth saving for future generations? Is everything there as a resource to yield a short-term profit?
Well, I must say, while I admire your spiritual values and your environmental concern, people have to live, people have to eat, jobs have to be created. They come in little pockets and packets here and there. Sandspit will be on its heels if even they lose that $3 or $4 million a year payroll.
What about the Haida people who've been there for tens of thousands of years?
Now we come to a different problem altogether.
Right. You talk about Sandspit. How old is the community of Sandspit?
50,
are there any
60 years.
cemeteries for the people there?
No, I don't think that
No,
as a matter of fact.
they come, cut, and run.
All right, how do we...
What about the Haida people?
What about the Haida people?
All right, I'm saying if you're going to say, what about this community of people? I'm saying there was a whole civilization that was there. And not just for 65 years, but for tens of thousands of years.
All right, how do we solve the Haida land claims? Haida Gwai, I think is the proper term, and they claim the entire South Moresby Peninsula as their native land.
I think they've got a lot of justice on their side.
Would you give it to them?
I don't think they're asking to have it all so they can boot us out. I think they're asking to be taken seriously as a nation, one that was never asked to become a part of Canada. And they're saying, hey, wait a minute, guys. You're destroying what is our national heritage, and we're saying we want to save some of that, and meanwhile, we'll negotiate a different relationship.
Well, of course...
That sounds pretty reasonable to me.
Any evening in front of the fire with a drink in my hand, I could agree with you right away. It's their nation. They should have it all. First of all, we've no guarantee...
They're not asking for it all. They're asking to be,
Well,
they're not talking about kicking people out who own property, as far as I know.
No, no. No, they're not asking to take over what you might call the settler's property. But our old friend Miles Richardson, who was very prominent on the objections, obviously they're going for a full land claim in the Queen Charlotte's. Now, obviously they can't get the full land claim, but once again we come to the politicians. The provincial government, up until very recently, wouldn't even speak to the hiders. The federal government won't carry it through, and what BC government's belief is that the costs of land claims must be paid by the federal taxpayer. And there we're in a complete and total bind, right?
Right. I agree.
We don't know what the answer is.
I agree. But the answer right now is this. While we try to get all of this together, the economics of it, the politics of it, for God's sake, let's stop the logging. Let's stop the logging until we get all that other stuff out of
I've
the
got
way.
all the plans here of option 1, option 2, option 3, and option 4. And the logging companies...
On Windy Bay, is this?
No, no, on the whole of the South Moresby's. You know, there was a much larger plan whereby 38% of the South Moresby's was in the logging plans for Western Forest. Now they're down and they've been squeezed back into the one island which has already, please forgive the mention of the word, been commercially utilized. If you backed away from Lyle Island, you wouldn't have any problems. Is Lyle Island all that important?
Yes, it is.
The Muddlettes.
Lyle Island, absolutely. All of that area. They've got to be saved. Once they're gone, they'll never be back again.
Yeah,
and I'm saying it's a treasure that should be saved forever.
Well, modern man has been active in that area for more than 100 years.
Yes.
Non-hiders. And it's very difficult to say. And don't forget that TFL 24 supplies part of the cut, the profit-making part of the cut, for the 2 pulp mills and the 3 big sawmills. That's also part of the compensation that must come.
Yeah. Well, I just can't get into the economics of it because the important thing is to save that area. You say that modern man has been in there for over 100 years.
Dug big open pits in Jedway.
When it takes 2 men days and days to cut down 1 tree, that's on a totally different scale from when 1 man with a chainsaw can cut that tree down in a matter of minutes. And that's what we're doing now. We're not talking about assaulting that area the way people did 100 years ago. They're going in, clearing that area, and just assaulting the whole area. We have too much muscle power now. And the Haida existed in that area for thousands of years. It must have taken them one hell of a long time to cut down a tree.
Yeah, of course, they didn't have the need for the lumber that we've had to use. I mean, this is part of our civilization. We can't step back from all frontiers.
Of course not. And
Affluence
nobody
came
is
from lumber.
asking us to step back from all frontiers. It's a minuscule part of all of the logging in British Columbia. You have got to stop perpetrating that myth that this represents some huge body blow to the logging industry. It's a tiny fraction of all the logging that goes on in the province. It's ideological, Jack. What it is they say the logging industry feels that if the environmentalists get away with this, it's the foot in the door, and that's the beginning of the next, and the next, and the next thing you know, we won't have any logging.
I'll agree with you on that, because 50%, I'll agree with what you said just now, 50% of British Columbia is neither in the wilderness areas, is either in national parks, provincial parks, or ecological reserves.
What?
About 50%, yeah.
The amount,
the amount of big areas.
The amount of space that we have set aside is minuscule.
And
you tell me about the provincial park, or the national parks we have in British Columbia. It's minuscule. The Broken Islands off the west coast. Where else do we have? We have the Pacific Rim, which is a little bit left over from McMillan-Blodell. We have nothing. We're pipsqueaks in terms of how much land we've set aside for parks. And how dare the logging industry behave as if asking for a little area like Mears or the Stein or the Charlottes, you know, represents this huge blow.
But don't forget there is a great amount of emotion involved in the whole thing, both from the unions, from the management, from the Indians, from the environmentalists with their headquarters in the east. Correct?
No. No.
Correct.
The environmentalists? The environmentalists, as far as I know, they're right down there in Victoria and Vancouver, in the Charlottes.
What can we agree on? First of all, we agree that you, David Suzuki, a pristine, virginal environmentalist, thinking
I would never
only
claim to be a virgin about anything, Jack.
virginally pure in your environmental thoughts. You claim that this jewel in our crown must not now or ever be touched, but you are not concerned about the economics of the proposition.
I'm saying that let's worry about the economics after the fact, but first let's protect the area. Because as long as, and how short-sighted it is of the logging industry, once they're cut down, those jobs are gone as well. The shocking aspect and the real scandal is that we have been conned by the logging industry, which has claimed that they are sustaining the yield, that they are harvesting a renewable product. The record of the forestry, the logging industry is a shoddy one. There are millions of acres of land in British Columbia that simply have not been reforested.
The records of governments and the records of logging companies has been shoddy. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. But that...
So then why must we...
That could be corrected. Now, I'm not arguing over the whole...
But why do we have to cut down the last virgin stands then?
Not
Surely
the
to God we could save some of them.
Goodness gracious me. On Lyle Island, the local environmentalists were even complaining about audio, what do you call it? Audio pollution by the blowing of whistle punks. You know, a scar on the hillside upset all the environmentalists cruising through that place in their fancy $500 a day yachts.
Listen, Jack.
I agree on the environment, but that'll never be a tourist resort.
Don't demean the argument by raising a bunch of kooks that are going on the far out end of it. I mean, that's not the issue. The issue is the spiritual value of wilderness. The issue is, do we really think we know everything there is to know about the complexity of ecosystems in forests and so on? That we can cut them down and feel we know enough to keep it going. Do you know how many plants and animals there are in the world?
No.
Huh? 30 million. 30 million animals and plants in the world. All right? And how many have biologists actually discovered? 1.7 million. We know barely over 5% of all species of plants and animals in the world, and we think we know enough to manage nature? How dare we? It's an incredible conceit.
David, I thank you for putting your position so clearly. David says, I don't know and I don't care about the economics or the effect on the industry or the effect on jobs in British Columbia, but if there's an environmental heritage that must be saved, save it.
Well, I wouldn't quite put it that way, but I would say save the environmental issue first, and then let's worry about the others later. And I don't believe for a minute that all of these environmental issues that are being fought in British Columbia add up to any more than a small fraction of the logging industry's income.
Probably.
Don't make it out to be a huge body blow.
No, all I'm merely saying is that the financial complications of setting up the park, meeting the HIDA claims and all the rest of it is a battle which we shall have to face down the road.
Right, but first save the area.
Move that Suzuki preserve the whole of South Moresby.
What about Jack Webster?
Moved that Webster preserve the whole of South Moresby, save and except the proper area of the ecological reserve on Windy Bay on Lyle Island. Thanks, David.
Thanks for having me.
Just one final question. When will it all be over in your informed information?
Jack, I'll make a deal.
Okay.
You and I retire together, okay? When you get out of this game, I'll get out.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Tomorrow, I have decided, my own choice, not to continue with my Webster program on BCTV next fall. I've been doing the program now for 9 years. It has been, I think I can say quite modestly, a matter of some permanent record and quite a success. Now, this is a very difficult decision for me to say or even to talk about. I think that the past 9 years at BCTV have been the best in my career, but I am not retiring. I'm only a boy nudging 69. I'm just changing direction. I plan to work for many years yet, and I shall be, I'm glad to tell you, be closely connected in the fall and thereafter with BCTV on the news, the public affairs, and the special events side for a long time to come. Now, having said that, let me give you a little bit of nostalgic background. I came out here in 1947. and I started work on the Vancouver Sun for Hal LeBaron Strait the day after I arrived. I was in the newspaper until 1953, and one celebrated day I left. Strait says he fired me. I say I quit. And then I went into radio. And I was in radio from 1953, and in 1963 I was dragged screaming and kicking into the talk show business, which was just then opening up. And I have been in the talk business, radio and television talk, since 1963, which from 1987 means 24 solid years. 24 solid years of dealing with each and every issue on a questioning, sometimes pleasant, happy, charming young man as I was, sometimes abrasive. 24 years. In fact, there are times when you go home after doing a long session on the telephones, when you pick up your knife and fork for supper and you say, "What do you want to talk about?" Or you'll answer the door at home and say, "Who's speaking, please? What do you want to talk about?" I've enjoyed it immensely. I don't plan to be incredibly nostalgic or anything this evening. I shall, of course, be continuing through until the 1st of May, which will be my final show. And to make it easier for me in the next month, whether you like it or whether you don't, I'm going to give you some of the best of Webster's. I've had some great fun, I'll tell you. I've had some deadly programs too, but I've had some great fun, and if you asked me, I can tell you who my most favorite interviews were and who were my best guests from my point of view. Best guest might be a very awkward guest, because when you've been in the news business as long as I've been, you don't always judge it on the personality of the guest. You judge on the content of the program. And I've won a few things here and there over the years. I haven't done quite as much active reporting as I would sometimes like to do, but I'm looking forward to my change of direction. What am I going to do? Before somebody asks me. Well, I'm going to broadcast for BCTV. I'm going to do the other odd public things. I might even get down to writing my book. And I'm looking forward to a very active and happy career, and I want to say very many thank yous. I'll make a little speech on the last day, but I want to say very many thank yous to the many fine people with whom I've worked over the years, especially the Webster crew, technical and editorial, who have held this old curmudgeon up on many an occasion. Now, just in case I couldn't ad-lib for 20 minutes tonight, and I don't plan to, I pulled out one little piece of nostalgia, if Pat is listening, that I want you to see. A few years ago, I went back to Scotland, to my roots, and I think this might be a good idea to show a little bit of the roots when I went back to Glasgow on that occasion with Suzanne Boyce and Grant Faint and Don Timbrell. And are we still stretching? No. And I'm just going to give you a little piece of that for the moment before I go to phones. Do we need sound? This is me arriving at my birthplace at 93 Battlefield Avenue.
In here, I'll tell you. 93 Battlefield Avenue. Well, still got tiled close. This is where the Websters lived, and this is where the other Websters lived. There's Mr. Spence in there now, and mind your step there. I still have nightmares when I was growing up of coming down here and hitting my head on that thing there. And this was the backyard at 93 Battlefield Avenue, which was a place where, oh, in my day, you know, after the First War, we were just alive with children. And we used to play, what was the name? We used to play a clockwork game in the windows to frighten the old ladies. We were just dreadful. In fact, there's the Webster window there. The Webster window. And the toilet. No bath, of course. Just the toilet. And the stained glass windows. Here we go. Bottom right-hand side. when I was a wee boy for a long while. Until I was 14 or 15, I lived here. Glasgow knock. I hope he's in. Mr. Spence.
Yes.
My name's Webster, Jack Webster.
Pleased to meet you, sir.
Did you ever know the Websters that lived here?
No.
Never heard of them.
That must have been a wee back in Dick Tuppence.
Dick Turpin's Day, eh?
Aye, because I've been here for a number of years, maybe about 30 years.
I was born here.
That's so.
Can I come in and look at the Roman kitchen?
Ah, you're welcome, my friend.
Thanks very much, Mr. Spence. Thanks very much. Here is the kitchen. This is the... Oh, it's changed. It's changed. Tell you, one thing that hasn't changed, Mr. Spence, is the sink, the kitchen sink, the traditional Glasgow kitchen sink of the 30s. Until I was about 10 years of age, I stood up in that sink, getting bathed. Sandy, me, Drew, and Ronnie when he was alive. And I can hear my mother yet saying from over there somewhere, "Don't forget to wash behind your knees." We wore short pants. I'll tell you something else. See this cupboard here?
Yes.
That was a kitchen press, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right.
My mother kept her food in here, and my father kept his dandelion wine. Oh, you've got a hot water boiler there now.
Was that not there at the restaurant?
No, hot water boiler.
Oh, aye.
And when you came into the kitchen from the room, my father would make us whistle, so we couldn't be eating all the time in the kitchen. And from that day to this, when I go to the fridge in my own house in West Vancouver, I whistle. Pavlov's dog. Let's go over here, because you've got a wee bed in here now. That's fine. Used to be a big bed here, remember? But we were all born in that bed, a hole-in-the-wall bed. I thought it was much bigger. It's a tiny wee place.
That's right.
We were born in this bed. I remember the midwife sitting on that table when my mother's in labor with a baby. And if we asked for an extra cookie, shut up. Your mother's no wheel. She's going to have a baby. Don't eat all the food in the house. Funny. Let's go bend the room, to use a piece of Glasgow dialect. Just the two rooms, the kitchen and the room, the front room. Put on the light, eh? Well, this room hasn't changed a bit. This was the Sunday go-to-meeting room. And there was another... This was the other hole-in-the-wall bed. Does nobody use hole-in-the-wall beds anymore?
No, so these modern houses, you know, and the bed, trying to get the bed there.
My father had an orchestra in the Depression. It was called William Webster and his Dance Orchestra. Long life and a prosperous one in the old Webster home.
Thanks very much.
And thank you very much. Very nice of you to show me around, Mr. Spence. I just put that on as sheer nostalgia tonight, to be quite honest, because I had said to you, if we're going to take requests, you know, during the day or on or off the air, about any best of Websters you want to see from the last 9 years on British Columbia television. And one other thing I should say, my change of plans has got nothing to do with anything else in the terms of the CTV cuts and whatnot. It was my decision not to continue with the Daily Webster program next fall. And the management have been very nice. Don Smith has lamented the move, but has been very gracious indeed. And I'll be back with a free-for-all after the break. Good morning. In case you've forgotten, my name is Webster, Jack Webster. And I'm the chap that used to be on morning radio. And now I'm on morning television, and I'm going to do my best to keep you interested in my approach to people and news. I hope you'll watch every morning if you can, if only to give me a chance to prove that I'm something more than a pretty face. The moment of truth tells you that, in fact, even though I'm a young 68, I'm facing a brand new challenge. Because apart from my BCTV work, I must keep myself busy and active and fully, what's the word? Informed. Oh, no, wrong call. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Jack.
Yeah.
That was quite a shock.
Oh.
I've listened to you on the radio for many years. I taped you every morning at 9 a.m. precisely, and I watch you at 5 o'clock precisely. And God, what are we going to do now?
Oh, you'll survive.
Oh, I don't think so,
Another
Jack.
Webster will come along.
I hope so.
Thank you very much indeed. Oh, there I go, cutting off friends as well as enemies. But as a matter of fact, I've been very gracious and mellow in the past year or so in the terms of the way I handle my programs. I do think it's correct when people say I have mellowed. I have not vented the political spleen I used to love venting. Mind you, there's plenty of opportunity now are coming up shortly from the Van der Zalm government to vent a little bit of political spleen. But in the good old days of WHC and of Barrett, it was even easier. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Jack. God, do I ever, I'm just upset about you quitting. But I live over in Saturn in the Gulf Islands, and you are my happy hour, and I've listened to you for years.
I hope you don't drink along with the happy hour.
No, I listen to you. And I don't always agree with you, but I am really going to miss you because I can only get 3 channels over there, so whatever you're going to do, I won't probably see you.
Well, no, you'll see me on BCTV and whatnot.
But listen, you should, what you should do now, you should retire completely.
No.
You're a young 68. Why don't you work over at Salt Spring? And you know, there's nothing nicer than Grandpa around with the grandchildren.
Thank you, ma'am. I am basically a part-time farmer, but more of a city slicker than I am farmer. Go ahead from Williams Lake.
Yeah, I'm a city slicker too, Jack.
Hi.
I want to tell you that you've just destroyed my day. I have listened to you all through your radio career and all through your television career.
Well, you can't remember any of the early radio business, can you?
Well, I only came here in 1954, and you hadn't been on all that long, about a year, I guess.
Yeah, 53 I went on. You must have heard me on the Mulligan Probe.
Yes.
Eh?
Yes, I did.
I don't remember. I can't
you
recall.
have given me pleasure every day of my life since I've been in Canada.
Thank you, ma'am. I've got a few friends out there. Can I do this for 2 segments? Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack. I'm happy, sad rather, to hear that you're leaving, not doing your 1-hour program. I met you rather when you were doing on the Waterfront show many years ago. And I don't know whether you recall or not the memorable trip from the Burrard Dry Dock to Terminal Island. I see perhaps you're a little puzzled about that little trip.
Terminal Island. Where's Terminal Island?
It's just across from, it's Terminal Dock.
Oh, yes. What were we on?
A ship called the Sunnyville.
What was the Sunnyhill?
Sunnyville, a Norwegian ship.
Had it been a disaster or something?
Oh, no. You came on to interview.
Oh, yes. That was a CBC roving reporter.
Yeah.
That was many years ago. I did that for God knows how many years, too. This is Jack Webster, your CBC roving reporter for today from Vancouver.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, one time when I interviewed an incredible fellow called Ronald Gordon Cumming, who was known as the Bard of the Caribou, I stand at the gap at Soda Creek, I got something like, I think maybe it was 1,000 letters, each one with a dollar bill in it to give to the Bard of the Caribou. That was a long time ago. I'd forgotten all about roving reporter. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack, I believe your previous calls have already said it.
I'm looking for requests for Best of Webster over the next month.
Right, here's one for you.
Right.
Barber Green Road.
Yeah, 55 Barber Green Road. Oh, what a funny road.
That's
What's his
what really-
name? Curly Hunter.
Yeah.
Charlie Hunter? No, Curly Hunter. He's as bald as a coot.
That really got me, that one.
We'll play that before the end of the month.
Okay, Jack.
Right, bye. Anyway, we'll tell you about Barber Green Road in advance, so if you want to tape it, because it's the funniest thing I ever did on the air, Matt. Well, I didn't do it. You haven't got it queued up now, have you? Yeah. I don't want to throw it away tonight. Give people a chance. We'll promote it some other time. Go ahead, please. Hello there.
Hello, Jack. I am sorry you're leaving. This is the second time in the last 2 weeks that I've got through to your show, and I don't believe it. But I was looking back over the clips you were showing, and you really haven't changed all that much.
I was 20 pounds heavier in that clip. I look like a bottle of beer.
No, but really, it's been a long time. But I'll be really sorry to hear you go, because I've enjoyed coming home at 5 o'clock. I didn't see you much when you were on 9. but it's been nice having it on.
Well, you know, it was time for me to kind of regroup. You know, I've done 9 solid years of this, and I had, how many years? 15 years of 3.5 hours a day radio talk before that, and I think I need a little bit of a rebirth.
Oh, that's true. I really wish you every success in your new venture, but one thing, the next time you go back to Glasgow, remember that they don't call a cookie, they don't call a biscuit a cookie, remember?
Forgive me, I remember. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack, I don't know whether or not you ever had any of the shows on when you were on TV, BCTV, or when it was with you were with NW. But I remember you're not only being a good reporter, you've been a very good reporter, and I know you've been there for the people. Lots of times when people have needed help with government bureaucracies or stuff like that, they phoned Webster. And I know when there were troubles in prisons and things like that, you were called in by prisoners to mediate, and because you were trusted by the public. Do you have any of those shows where you may have been on radio or TV?
Oh, yeah, I've got the radio.
In a prisoner dispute or whatever.
I've got the radio show of the BC prison riot, but it's kind of difficult to do.
Yeah, you don't have anything on TV that you did that kind of...
Yeah, I did
this is where you were great.
Well, of course, there was a lot of easy meat to be done on radio in those days. Conditions were so bad socially in the province in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
But thanks, love. Okay, take a break. Last call. Go ahead, please.
Thanks for all the informative years, Jack.
You couldn't have said it nicer. And for the last time on radio, 16 years, 3.5 hours a day, 44 weeks a year, and 9 years before that, for the last time, next, the news. Go ahead, please.
Webster,
Yes.
what are you doing?
What do you mean, what am I doing? I'm on the air.
It's Fotheringham here.
Hello, Alan. Where are you speaking from? South America?
I'm speaking from Washington. I just got a call from the White House. They're all upset. They thought they had problems with Kipper Gap, with Iran amok, and now they hear Webster's quitting. What in Christ is going on?
I'm not quitting. I'm just changing directions, you fool.
Changing direction for more money, no doubt.
No, I'm... No, but you can act as my agent for the fancy money in your parts of the world.
That's ESP, Webster, because as a matter of fact, this morning my kitchen sink was on the fritz, and I called a plumber, and they came around with a large truck, John G. Webster Plumbers, and I thought, oh, my dear old working-class friend from Glasgow. So it was obviously ESP, and now you're giving up your role as a millionaire. You're going back to the working class.
That's correct, Alan. But I'm going to keep myself active, I'll tell you, one way or another.
What are you going to do?
Well, you might nag me into doing my book. I'm going to continue doing stuff for BCTV.
Yes.
You know, news specials and public affairs. I'll do the odd shot here and there. Get myself back into good physical health, stop smoking.
Oh, that's a likely prospect.
Isn't it? Well, Alan, it was very nice of you to call. I hear you'll be out here at the weekend.
No, it's been canceled now. I won't be.
Give me a call at home.
Okay, will do. Thanks, Jack.
Thanks, Alan.
All the best.
Bye. He remembered to say all the best. He was a little bit late, mind you, but he did remember to say it. Go ahead, please.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Hey, Webster. I came out here in 1956, and God, I listened to you, and I watched you and all that, and I was always well pleased until tonight.
You're mad at me?
Well, yes, in a way. I believe Suzuki was right. There are a few trees and a few people there they might lose their jobs for a very short time, and then what? We can't grow them back. So what's the difference? They lose their job today or 6 months from today.
Yeah, I'm afraid I have a natural predilection towards intelligent logging, and the point I made is that Lyle Island has been logged and logged and logged and logged.
Yeah, I know.
They can have the rest of the Moresbys.
No, but
I
the
wasn't...
idea is we're overdoing it, I think, because I've got great-grandchildren. I'm 80. You're a young pup at 68, right? I don't blame you for going back into business again. But the idea is I've got great-grandchildren. What is going to happen to them? when we cut out all the bloody trees that we got in the country.
Gosh, even at 80 you should realize that there's perfectly proper ways to log. And I'm not going to get into the Suzuki argument just now because my mind's not tuned up, but thank you very much.
No, but wait.
No, I'm not waiting. I'm the boss.
I wish you the best into whatever you get into.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello, Mr. Webster?
Yes.
Yeah, just, you were talking about where you stayed in Battlefield Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
My sister's there at 47 Battlefield Avenue, and you should see what they're doing there. They've got grass back in the back greens.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm sure that 200,000 viewers will be fascinated to know.
All the best to you, Jack.
Thank you. Go ahead from Fraser Lake.
Hi, Jack. This is an old friend of yours, but I doubt that you'll remember me. I knew you in 1953. I was a copy runner on the Vancouver Sun in the days of Hal Strait and Jaime Koshevoy and Earl Smith. And
what's your name?
My name then was Jackie Seal. I'm now Jackie Peters. And then I was at UBC the next year, Jack, when Pat Carney was there, and actually Fotheringham had been at UBC the year before, and when I went to UBC, he went to the Sun.
Well, good for you, Jackie. And
So anyway, Jack, I want to say how glad I am that you're getting off the air, because now at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we'll be able to get something done instead of sitting in front of the television.
Thank you very much,
We've
Jackie.
enjoyed you so much.
Thank you, love. Go ahead from Nelson.
Congratulations, Jack, and I'm going to miss you sadly. I've agreed with you and disagreed with you. A couple of things, though, about the Suzuki program. You were right on. I liked what you had to say, and it was exactly right. And one thing that you might notice looking at a map of BC, that wherever there are parks, the small towns next to them have the highest unemployment rates in the province.
I'm sure I'm right about the percentage of national parks and provincial parks. In fact, I should, because there are some massive parks in the interior.
And some tremendous ecological reserves.
I can't even remember the names for the moment. Well, thank you very much.
One other thing, too.
Yes?
When you're talking
No,
about...
I haven't got it. I've made my announcement. No Webster in the fall, but I'll be very active with BCTV and at other things. After the break. Business as usual tomorrow night with John Grace, the Privacy Commissioner, Maurice Strong from the United Nations, and Les Bewley, the outspoken former judge on the new parole system. Don't forget, let us know during the day about any special requests for reruns of the bests of Webster. Tomorrow, 5 p.m. precisely.